The city of St. Louis brought us the greatest show on turf. However, that's not good enough, apparently, for the NFL owners, who have bigger fish to fry, and catapulted the Rams out of the city with the Golden Arch in favor of the bright lights in Hollywood. So what's the impact going to be in losing the Rams for St. Louis? And how are people reacting to the news? To get an on-the-ground perspective, I turn to Anthony Stalter of 101 ESPN Radio in St. Louis to gain a local perspective. Now, transitioning to the Rams and then moving out of St. Louis, I'm just wondering, since you're on the ground there, what has been some of the reaction now that the news has settled in that St. Louis is going to lose their football team?
You know, Kevin, just to give you a little bit of a background, I've been the pregame host for the Rams radio network for the last couple of years now. So we've at 101 ESPN, which is where my midday show is here in St. Louis, we have been the rights holders for the Rams for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's been tough because we have had people like Kevin Demoff, the COO, who has been part of the one of the faces along with Stan Kroenke to moving the Rams out to LA. Kevin Demoff has come on our airwaves before telling our listeners and Rams fans, don't worry about the fact that Kroenke was looking at land out in Inglewood. We're trying to do everything possible to work with the city of St. Louis to keep the Rams in place, and he sold everybody a bill of goods. So it's tough. People in St. Louis understand why Kroenke moved the team to L.A. We understand why L.A. Rams fans are excited in St. Louis. We went through that in '95. Now I wasn't here. I was only 13 years old or whatever when the Rams moved, but everybody was excited here. So we get the aspect of losing a team and another city gaining one, but the efforts of St. Louis, the city, and then the task force that was put in place to keep the Rams, all of that went for naught, and it's just a shame. And you can imagine, Kevin, there's a lot of disappointment that the Rams are gone.
And I imagine that Stan Kroenke isn't the most popular guy in the city of St. Louis now. So could you just give me a general opinion on how he's viewed amongst the people there in St. Louis?
Well, I don't think it'd be a stretch, Kevin, to say that he's hated. Kroenke was part of the ownership group that brought the Rams to St. Louis in the first place. And a couple of years ago, when the Rams were up for sale, Kroenke, it basically kind of the last second exercised his right for full ownership. Now, he had every right to do that, but Shad Khan, who's now the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was also in the mix. He's from central Illinois in St. Louis, for those that aren't aware. I mean, Illinois, they're right across the border, about 30 minutes from where we are in the city. Shad Khan wanted to buy the Rams, and everybody in St. Louis at the time thought that it'd be better if Stan Kroenke exercised that right because he's a Missouri man. He's from Missouri, and everybody figured, well, he's not going to move the team to L.A., especially after he helped bring the Rams to St. Louis. But in the long run, or hindsight being 2020, it would have been better if Shad Khan purchased the team because you see how much he's put into the Jaguars and how dedicated he is to Jacksonville, at least for the time being. And again, it just would have been better had he been the owner. So, no, Stan Kroenke is not popular right now in the Lou.
Now, in your opinion, did the Rams do enough to keep the Rams in St. Louis, or do you think it was just a better business deal out in L.A.?
Well, I think it's both, Kevin. Stan Kroenke. Look, LA is the number 2 media market in the country. St. Louis is, I think, we're 27 or 28th. As soon as Stan Kroenke moved the team, his ownership value doubled. The Rams doubled in value. So, from a monetary standpoint, again, we get it. We understand why the move was made. However, the task force that was here in St. Louis, did an incredible job. It was Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz, and Dave Peacock from day one tried to keep the Rams here in St. Louis by getting public funds to build a new stadium in St. Louis. Mayor Francis Slay was on board for that. The Governor Jay Nixon was on board for that. I mean, the city of St. Louis did everything possible to keep the Rams in place by, with the possibility and the promise that a new stadium would be built. And Kroenke didn't want to be here. And the NFL owners, they made it clear that the city of St. Louis, they don't view it as a viable market. So at the end of the day, that's all that mattered. While St. Louis put its best face forward and did an excellent job, the 32 owners and Kroenke, so 31 owners plus Kroenke, all that mattered was their opinion, and they felt as though that L.A. And Kroenke's deep pockets were the best case scenario for the Rams.
Now, how do you think the loss of the Rams will affect the sports landscape in St. Louis, and do you think the Rams will be missed over the long haul there in St. Louis as well?
Well, Kevin, you're out in Windsor, and you cover a lot of the Tigers, obviously. And in fact, I lived in Detroit for 5 years myself. I went to Central Michigan University, so I'm well aware of the market there. And you guys are well aware, unfortunately, of how big and popular the Cardinals are. 2006, when the Cardinals came into Detroit and upset the Tigers, I was there. I was kind of covering Detroit for the Tigers for the radio station. As much as people love the Tigers, you can triple that here in St. Louis for the Cardinals. I mean, they're fanatic about the Redbirds. They love it. They love the fact that it's a baseball town. And while it hurt to lose the Rams, you still have the Cardinals. We still have the Blues. Unfortunately, right now, the college landscape isn't that great with Mizzou basketball and St. Louis University basketball not playing well. But with spring training right around the corner, people are excited for that. I'm interested to see, though, how people view the NFL when fall comes around. You don't have a team anymore to root for, or you're trying to pick and choose who you want to follow, whether that's the Rams or a new team. So I'm interested, again, to see what happens in the fall and see where the interest level is. But the NFL is highly popular, and with the Cardinals and the Blues in town, people have more than enough teams to root for here in St. Louis.
My final question for you is a two-part question having to do with how do you think the transition for this current Rams team will go to LA, and do you think the city of St. Louis will get another team eventually?
Unfortunately, I'm going to answer your second question first. Unfortunately, I don't see St. Louis getting an NFL team anytime soon. This is twice now where the city has lost a team. The St. Louis Cardinals were the first to leave, and then the Rams, obviously, a couple weeks ago heading to LA. The NFL ownership, and I'm going to go back to what I just said a couple minutes ago because it's important. The NFL ownership, the 32 owners, don't feel as though that St. Louis is a viable NFL market. They made that clear. Mark Davis, the owner of the Oakland Raiders, when asked, would you move the Raiders to St. Louis? They're willing to build you a new stadium. Mark Davis, who's been fighting with Oakland to get his new stadium for the longest time, flat out said no. In fact, when he was asked, hey, what about San Antonio? What about, Toronto? What about Las Vegas? He said, well, everything's a possibility. And then again, he was asked, what about St. Louis? And he said, no, absolutely not. So you have an owner who can't get a stadium in Oakland, who has other opportunities that he's willing to keep open, like Vegas and San Antonio, saying, hey, I don't want anything to do with St. Louis. So if expansion comes in the next 10 or 15 years, maybe the Rams will get a team. Jacksonville's the Jaguars' lease with Jacksonville, I think, runs till 2027 or 2028. So maybe Shad Khan would be willing to move the Jaguars here. Either way, I hope that for the city of St. Louis, we don't adopt a team again. We get our own. Don't have it St. Louis Jaguars. Rename the team, rebrand the team if that winds up happening. But really, we just went through this with St. Louis losing the Rams. I don't want any market to lose their team. We've seen it here up close and personal. So I hope it's not the Jaguars. I hope it's an expansion team so Jacksonville can keep their team. As far as the transition, Kevin, from St. Louis to LA, you better win. You better win. I mean, the Rams did not win here in St. Louis for over 10 years. and and people kind of attack the attendance numbers. Well, in LA, you got USC, you've got other college programs there like UCLA. You have other things to do outside of football. You've got the Dodgers, you've got baseball, you got everything there. Lakers, you better win, or else those people won't show up either. That's what I have to say about the transition to LA.
Well, Anthony, we want to thank you for a few minutes and for joining us this morning on the Two-Man Advantage podcast. It was a lot of fun, buddy.
No, not a problem, Kevin. Anytime. And I just want to say that I've listened to the Two-Man Advantage podcast a couple times before. You're doing great work. I think you're an inspiration, Kevin. And again, it was my pleasure to join you today.
Thanks for your time and have a great day, Anthony.
You too.